It's been a week filled with drama in politics. At the local level, there's a war over garbage involving the mayor, city council, and now the general counsel, where a vote of no confidence came from and how it could impact the city of Jacksonville. President Trump started fast out of the gates in his new administration. Immigration enforcement has been top of mind. That has led to conflict in the state capital of Florida, why the Republican governor is battling with the Republican-led legislature. We dive into all of it on This Week in Jacksonville. And welcome to February. In this episode of This Week in Jacksonville, so drama is the word for politics and policy this week. Creating new policies to tackle illegal immigration remains top priority for state leaders, but Governor Ron DeSantis says he would veto the state's newly passed immigration bill when it came around. So during a roundtable in Titusville, the governor said that the bill will not get his signature. That legislation was passed by lawmakers just the night before. DeSantis is taking issue with Republicans, putting Florida Agriculture Commissioner Wilton Simpson in command of immigration in the state. The bill that was passed includes tougher measures for illegal entry into Florida and the creation of a state immigration officer.
How could I possibly sign something that is contrary to everything I've campaigned on, that's contrary to what President Trump campaigned on, that makes us a de facto sanctuary state, that neuters the operations we're doing?
Yeah, Republican House Speaker Daniel Perez fired back, saying in part, lawmakers passed the most conservative, the most aggressive, the most effective immigration bill in the country. Simply saying something is terrible over and over doesn't actually make it true. Threatening others to get your way isn't leadership, it's immaturity. Governor DeSantis was asked after vetoing the bill if he would be calling another special session. He didn't give a clear answer on that, but he did say in part, this is a vote that will reverberate in these representatives' entire careers. This is the worst one. This will sting. All right, government law attorney Chris Hand is with me today. And we call this Hand on Government. State, federal politics kind of colliding this week. And many people did not expect to see Republicans battling each other in Tallahassee. But suddenly it was on full display that there's a rift between the governor and other Republicans in state government.
Ken, I'm starting to get the feeling that maybe the governor and the legislature aren't getting along right now. But look, what's remarkable about this situation we're seeing from Tallahassee is the fact that it's been absent for a number of years. Traditionally in Florida government, there has been this kind of push-pull between the executive branch and the legislative branch. And in the past, legislative leaders have been very determined to guard their institutional prerogatives. Look, when you look at the Florida Constitution, the very first branch of government named in Article 3 is the legislative branch. The next one named is the executive branch in Article 4. So you're used to seeing over the span of time, legislatures, House speakers, and Senate presidents stand up to defend their institutions and to say, look, we'll work with the governor, but we don't work for them. We're not going to take orders from them. And it hasn't really been, we haven't seen that dynamic very much during Governor DeSantis' time in office, but we're seeing it now, and we're seeing it in various ways, both procedurally and substantively. Look, he called this special session for January 27th. Under the Constitution, they're required to attend. But the same day he did that, the House Speaker, Danny Perez, and the Senate President, Ben Albritton, sent a memo back to him essentially saying, no, we don't want to do that. We want to wait until the regular session. They had to show up anyway, and when they got there on Monday, the 27th, they did what's called gavel in and gavel out. They started the special session he called, and then they adjourned it, and then had their own special session to pass the bill they wanted, obviously that contains some factors that he didn't agree with. So what we're seeing, Kent, is unusual during the DeSantis era, but it's not unusual in the scope of Florida governmental history, where there is some back and forth between co-equal branches of government. The executive branch led by the governor, the legislature led by the House Speaker and Senate President.
Yeah. Governor DeSantis faced with term limits. He can't run for office again. He's got his final 2 years. Does this indicate that he's lame duck, that he's at the mercy of the legislatures in order to get anything done?
Well, I think this is very common for governors who are in the last 2 years of their term, that, people are already beginning to think about who might the next governor be in January of 2027. So there's a natural additional resistance that arises in the legislature beyond that sort of typical type that I talked about. So I think the term lame duck may be premature to say that, but certainly his influence in Tallahassee is waning, as is the case with every governor in the final 2 years of a two-term governorship.
So you're saying not completely unusual, but it is jarring that it all unfolded this week and we saw this.
But I think what's happening, Ken, any other former governors out there saying, welcome to the club, because they certainly experienced this in different ways. It's just new for Governor DeSantis.
Yeah. So Governor DeSantis was he surprised when this happened this week? He said about his proposed changes on the immigration enforcement bill, he called it half measures, what the legislature did. And then he said the bill, even with these proposed changes, is weak. That's what he posted on social media. And as you mentioned, there's the interplay between the Senate president and the Speaker of the House in Florida and the executive branch. Is this it? If the governor says, nope, I'm not signing that, I'll veto that, then where do we go? Just nothing happen?
Not necessarily. I mean, first of all, just to review some of the specifics of the bill, because I think the House and Senate would disagree with that characterization. Provides $500 million to $500 million to help state and local agencies cooperate with the federal government. Obviously, one of the most controversial changes is taking away in-state tuition for undocumented immigrant children who apply to Florida colleges. So there's a number of things in this bill. And then, of course, the new immigration office, which they would have report to the Commissioner of Agriculture rather than the governor. I think that's probably one of the flashpoints of this debate. But it's not over. Look, one of the first acts the legislature took in this special session was to override a budget veto the governor had issued in 2024 when he either accidentally or on purpose vetoed a significant amount of money to help fund legislative operations. That was the first step. They override that veto to put those monies back in the budget. So they've certainly shown they're willing to override the governor. Whether or not they have the votes on this particular issue is to be determined based on when the veto is issued, whether the bill comes back. But what I don't think we've seen the last of is this sort of adversarial back and forth between the governor's office and the legislature. I think for the first time in his era as governor, this is likely to define the 2025 legislative session.
Yeah, well, not lost on me and others who watch this, the agriculture commissioner, maybe somebody who wants to be governor in the future. So is there something happening on the backside for Republicans where they're trying to elevate someone that they want to be in leadership in 2 years?
There could be some element of that. There could also be some element of realignment with the Trump administration. And what I mean by that is, Kent, you'll remember when Governor DeSantis was unsuccessfully running for president, many members of the Florida legislature had endorsed him. He obviously didn't win the primaries. President Trump did, and ultimately won the general election as well. So partially what we're seeing is a realignment of those legislators from the DeSantis camp to the Trump camp. You will note they named their immigration bill, the Trump bill, that's the acronym. They made it very clear that they were obtaining technical assistance from the Trump administration in crafting the bill. When they originally objected to the special session, they said it was because they wanted to wait on guidance from President Trump and his administration before moving forward. So I think part of what we're seeing, in addition to an effort to kind of show their independence and their institutional prerogatives, it's a realignment around President Trump and his agenda as opposed to Governor DeSantis and his.
Yeah, and many of us have noted in these first 2 weeks of the new Trump administration, throttled down, and it has really been full force on trying to come to the things that he said were campaign promises. Stay with us, though, from this focus on national politics and what's happening in the state. We're going to look at what's happening locally. There's a connection, by the way. We're going to turn hand on government into hand on jacks next. Stay with us.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
And our Hand on Government episode continues with Chris Hand, former chief of staff in the city of Jacksonville. So pull back the drapes for us a little bit on what's happening in city government, Chris, because we've got the council, the mayor, now the general counsel, and all kind of caught up fighting about garbage and costs.
One of your colleagues, David Waters, likes to say there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation. Well, I think that also be applied to the city of Jacksonville. There's never a dull moment there either, and a lot facing the city right now, Kent. As you just referred to, one of the current controversies is a debate over garbage. You might recall that obviously one of the most important, most fundamental services that any city government supplies to its residents is garbage pickup, solid waste collection. Back in December, the city council voted to provide Meridian Waste, which is one of the private waste haulers that citizens use here in Jacksonville, a 29% rate increase, which the hauler said was necessary in order to pay their workers. The mayor disagreed with that. She wanted a smaller increase, about 5%. She vetoed that bill, and council then overrode that veto. You think, well, maybe that's the end of the process, right? It kind of went through and council prevailed. The mayor's office asked the general counsel's office for a binding legal opinion on whether that vote was valid. For decades, Kent, city council, there's an ordinance that gives city council the power to negotiate and set rates with waste haulers. This binding opinion has invalidated that ordinance and said that council has violated the separation of powers, that it's done something that is more in the executive branch realm than in the legislative branch realm. This opinion has been very controversial for a number of reasons. Number one, because again, for decades, city council has held this rate setting function, kind of a core function of government, and there's never been any previous objection to it. Also because city council negotiates other types of rates and agreements. For example, the contribution that JEA makes to the city in lieu of property taxes, that is a council negotiation, and there are others as well. So that's controversial. I think also controversial about the opinion is that it invalidated the ordinance, but said the city could keep using that invalid ordinance unless either the mayor's office or the city council raises a concern about separation of powers. So I think there was a little confusion about that. The end result is obviously council sort of unhappy with this decision, and a couple of council members have now filed a resolution of no confidence against the general counsel. Now, that does not remove him from office. There's a whole separate process from that. But this will be a bill that will be before council over the next couple of months and will be a vehicle, I'm sure, to discuss that particular opinion. I think another vehicle will be Meridian Waste, who's the hauler, has said that it is probably going to potentially sue the city of Jacksonville and have this end up in a court of law to determine who's right, on the status of the law in Jacksonville.
So Ron Salem filed this resolution, 2025-81, but it basically is saying that Michael Fackler, the general counsel in this binding legal opinion, invalidated that legislation that you were just talking about. Mayor Deegan essentially came to the general counsel's defense and said, hey, mayor's office saying the mayor doesn't, if they disagree with the opinion, doesn't say, well, the general counsel's not doing their job. Is there funny business going on here?
Well, there's been, I think, a lot of back and forth on, this, as you know, Ken, this happens in Jacksonville every decade. There's some sort of battle over garbage. It takes a different form every time. There's been a lot of back and forth on this after the general counsel issued his binding opinion. Council responded. When they filed their resolution, the Jacksonville Bar Association actually passed their board actually passed a resolution, criticizing the council for introducing their resolution. Yeah. Again, this is going to be a back and forth that is going to continue for a while, especially because of the possibility of legal action and as this resolution's pending. But I think really, Kent, at the root of all of this is the city of Jacksonville, like cities and counties across the country right now, is really beginning to enter a very difficult budget period. And I can tell you from someone who was at City Hall during another difficult budget period, every issue of spending often becomes a contentious one when you're in a period where the city's potentially running significant deficits. The council auditor's office has projected large deficits in the years to come. That really changes the dynamic, again, between the executive branch and the legislative branch, because there's a shrinking pie to go around and everyone's trying to figure out how best to distribute that.
Mayor Deegan is going to be with us later in this month, but she told us in the past that 2025's balance sheet may not look as favorable as 2024. Could there be, when I'm reading here, some council members are talking about it, $100 million in budget deficits by 2028?
Well, this is from an analysis the council auditor's office did last summer in July of 2024, in which they projected deficits this coming year of nearly $80 million, next year of about $45 million, and then for the next 2 years of close to $105 million. Those are massive, massive deficits. If they turn out to be true, those were just projections. We'll have to see if the reality matches that. But those kind of deficits call for very tough choices at the city of Jacksonville, particularly in an era where the city has recently made some major investments, whether that's in the renovation of the stadium whether that's in new pension benefits that were given to certain employees, pay raises given to certain employees, investments in downtown development projects. So again, that is the difficult task facing the city. Given these investments that have been made, given the economic realities, where does the rubber meet the road? And I think those call for very tough decisions between the mayor's office and city council to figure out how to keep that budget balanced.
Yeah, in our final minute for this segment, the mayor is embarked on having some town halls. We saw the first one this week. How do those help or hurt or whatever? And basically she's talking about her budget priorities, I think, with citizens.
Well, it's really something that every mayor should do. Mayor John Payton did that a lot while he was in office as well. And I think it is a great way for the mayor to engage with citizens. She's had the first of those town halls. There's several more still to go. I would really encourage citizens who have an interest in the budget, which is a statement of priorities for our city, to go to the meeting nearest them, have a chance to have some dialogue with the mayor, share their perspectives on what they want the city of Jacksonville's financial priorities to be. That's an important opportunity, and I think very good for the mayor's office to provide that opportunity, really something that every mayor should do.
Yeah. All right, Chris, don't go anywhere. And for each of you, one more commercial break, and then we're going to talk about an institutional icon in the city and the farewell to Sam Mousa next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
This past week, family, friends, and the community gathered together and remembered and honored the late Sam Mousa. Mousa died the previous week. He served the city of Jacksonville during 5 administrations. Here's a look at his funeral this week. In honor of Mousa's service to the city, Mayor Donna Deegan ordered all flags at city offices be flown at half-staff. That was on Wednesday and Thursday. So many people coming out to honor him. And Chris, I just want to bring you into this conversation. Were you able to attend that service? And what was your interaction with Sam Mousa over the years?
Well, I was very lucky to get to know Sam in a couple of different ways, including kind of our sort of shared experience at the city of Jacksonville. And it's interesting, Kent, government also often has the perception of being bureaucratic and inefficient, maybe unintelligible in the way it communicates. And that was never the case with Sam Mousa. I mean, he was really the embodiment of efficiency, productivity, getting things done, speaking clearly and candidly. He demanded results and demanded professionalism. But, you know, for all of the sort of no-nonsense exterior at times in that process, Sam was an extremely kind-hearted and generous person with his time, with his guidance, with his mentorship. The number of City of Jacksonville and other public officials he's mentored is countless. I'm very lucky to have been one of them, someone who was able to learn from Sam. He was a tremendous resource when I was at the city, someone who had been there before. And Kent, as you know, I've had the privilege to sort of help chronicle the history of Jacksonville consolidation. Yeah. And, in that process, elected officials like mayors and council people usually get top billing, which is understandable. But I really think the main protagonists in the now more than 55-year history of consolidation are 2 people. Lex Hester, who created consolidation, was really sort of the first major chief administrative officer in the city of Jacksonville, and someone who was his colleague and good friend, Sam Mousa, who for the last 25 years really has sustained and grown and evolved the consolidated model. And, Lex Hester and Sam Mousa share one other sad thing in common. In October of 2000, Lex Hester very unexpectedly passed away at the age of 64. He was succeeded in his job by his deputy and good friend, Sam Mousa. And just last week, at the age of 72, Sam Mousa unexpectedly passed away. And both have left huge marks in this community that won't soon be forgotten. And the one solace I take, Kent, is the hope that Lex Hester and Sam Mousa are now talking about how to build that next infrastructure project or to get a bill through city council. 2 titans who were joined together, both who had a huge impact in this community. Sam Mousa will be deeply missed.
Thank you for your perspective on that. Before we run out of time, I did want to talk about one other issue, and Sam Mousa would have gotten involved with this if he was around. Mayor Deegan said the city has no choice but to build a new jail. Estimates put that at like a cost of $1 billion. Where do you see that going, and is a new jail really needed?
Well, I know for years there have been discussions about concerns from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office at the current jail in downtown Jacksonville, that the space is old, it's become inadequate for their needs, and particularly a desire to move the jail out of downtown, potentially helping to free up room for some other downtown development and put the jail somewhere else. As you say, the big challenge, particularly in these difficult fiscal times we've been talking about, is the cost of it. The initial estimates of that new jail are maybe as much as $1 billion. We've already got a roughly $1 billion project on the agenda. That's renovating the stadium. This would be adding to that. And there's a variety of ways one can go about funding a $1 billion project, but at the end of the day, the city of Jacksonville still has to fund the bill no matter how you're doing that. So I think that's going to be one of the things. This has not just been a priority for the mayor. Former council president Ron Salem was a priority for him. It's a priority for the sheriff. So I'm sure they'll be working through that in the months to come, but that's going to be the sort of difficult needle to thread. In these difficult fiscal times when you're running deficits, how do you fund a $1 billion, an additional $1 billion infrastructure project? We'll look forward to hearing more about where that project goes.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people need to weigh in on how to do it in a way that doesn't hurt residents as much as all of us would think. Boy, with inflation and everything we've seen with the economy, certainly don't want to see increased taxes or that kind of thing. But Chris Hand, you always have great perspective, and I appreciate sharing your experience with us on our show.
Ken, great to be here as always. Thank you.
All right, well, UNF President Moaz Lamayam, he plans to join us next time. So will special guest Carol Coletta. I'm Kent Justice. Thanks for watching on air on Channel 4 and the CW17 and online, newsforjax.com. Don't forget our streaming service, News4Jax Plus. And don't miss out This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. This episode, this week of our podcast, we're looking at the expansion of tourism in Jacksonville and the billions of dollars coming in because of it. You can find new episodes every Thursday at 9 a.m. You're going to find it right now on News4Jax Plus. It's under the channel This Week in Jacksonville. You'll also find This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition available wherever you find your podcasts, like Apple, Spotify, or Google.
See why every day more people are choosing News4Jax, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.